Okay, so today's stage one or step one of the engine rebuild. Okay, originally I was just going to let you guys go at it. Okay, yeah, phones away, headphones, all of that away. None of that needs to be out. So as I was disassembling the motors for your class and the other class, pieces kind of get mixed up. So it's going to take a little longer as I try to find all the pieces, which can be very helpful for you guys. For those that had a motor inside a tote that's missing pieces. So this way, as I use the bucket of parts, you can be looking for the same pieces that are missing. There's probably a good 3 or 4 engines of bolts and stuff in here. So I am very picky about the right size. So if we look at this one versus this one, there's a difference besides the washer. Okay, the biggest difference is this is the head, and I can tell you already this is what screws down the pull start. These, I got 4 of them right here, are the valve cover. Then you have some that are really close, like this one. Oh, that's a valve cover. There's one that's just slightly longer that throws everybody off. And when I put them up to each other, I go, well, yeah, obviously those are different. But when you're looking for bolts, people don't pay much attention. I'm trying to line up the heads. You can see that they are just slightly, this one's slightly longer. And if you use this longer one on the valve cover, you will strip the threads out. Okay? So what I'll do is I will assemble the parts that you will do for that day, and then I will disassemble it so that way you can see the hardware you have to match. Doesn't mean you come over here and steal my hardware, okay? So, all right. I would highly recommend for today that you have gloves. This is probably one of the messier jobs today. And we're just going to put on a couple of the basic parts. To start with, we'll need a governor, nipple, and there is a very thin black washer. Kind of think of this as like building with Legos and you're trying to find the right piece. Don't accept the knockoff. The washer, an actual washer, right there. Need a little magnet. There we go. And a tiny, very thin black washer, and you'll know it's the right one because it will fit just behind there. Okay. Now, if you have a race motor, you don't need those pieces. All right. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to clean this out, okay? So this one still has the paper gasket, so I'm going to carefully take that off without tearing it, so I don't have to make a new one, okay? And then I still have all this motor oil still in there. The board's a little greasy, so I want to wipe all that down, okay? And there's some, looks like some metal shavings in there. Metal shavings and engine don't like each other. We never got along. So I want to clean all of that out. What happens is those particles, let's see if I can get down inside there. You see that grime sitting down there? That can get caught up between the crankshaft connecting rod. It can get caught up inside here where the bearing support is for the cam, and that will not lubricate it. It will block the oil from fitting in there, and it will cause the motor to die prematurely. Okay, so the biggest things that you need to know if you have a good block or a broken block is if these studs are still here, okay, all the fins are in place, that there's no gouging inside the block or the bore. So let's clean that off. Okay, next spot, this is okay if this is fractured up here. This is just a guard for the flywheel, but you don't want this one fractured. These right here fractured. These aren't used, so those are okay. All right. If you have a racing motor, that should be plugged off with a bolt. If it's not, we need to take care of that, or oil will squirt out of there. Same thing, you won't have this on a racing motor, and so there should be a bolt in that place. And then we'll put an oil sensor in, and we'll just remove the wires. I think there's 3 racing motors sitting out there between the 2 classes. That governor arm should have stayed in, okay, with its clasp. I'm just going to keep wiping down the inside here. Okay. So the next thing I need to work on is the part that's inside here. That's the actual governor. That's this part right here. These little pieces right here are what actuates, okay, as this spins, those fling outwards, okay? And as they fling outwards, it causes this to ride up, pressing against the arm right here. You can see the little wear mark right there, because this one didn't have the nipple on it. And that pushes this, which then is attached to the governor arm, this part right here. And that's what then changes the throttle position, or not the throttle, but the choke, to slow down the motor. So that way it doesn't over rev and blow up. These motors are not designed to go in high RPMs, or because the webbing, that's this metal webs right here, are not designed for all that pressure, and it will cause the motor to crack. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to move that arm out of the way. I'm going to move, let's see if I can get it all in view here. Let's open up the counterweights. I am going to install the washer. If I can get it in view, sorry, I'm backwards. The washer, and then the nipple, okay? Now to keep it in place so it doesn't fall out so easily, we're going to use some engine assembly grease. And this is why you wanted gloves. So I'm just going to put a little bit, oh, hasn't been worked over for a little bit. Just going to put a little bit on my hand. Okay. So that way it will go inside the plastic there and help hold it in place. Put the washer on. Now I'm going to slide it down. Now the counterweights are open, so that way as I slide this down, oops, see that counterweight closed. So I'm just going to pry it back. There we go. Push it down, and the counterweights will then get engaged. You see it closed on there. So now as I spin this, it pushes that up. Okay, that's what controls the RPM. Okay, I'm just making sure it's nice, and it goes back down. And that's what sits here. So when that goes up, you can see that arm moves upwards. And then now it's closed again. Okay? So that one's engaged. The next thing I want to install is the oil sensor. Let's see if I can find one out of the box. Now what does the oil sensor do? Flyer, huh?
Yeah, it's another CTSO activity. Flower arrangements.
Well, that one's kind of fun. All right. So we have our sending unit. Okay, and what was the purpose of this piece? So there should have been, it's on your PowerPoint that you had to turn in. It sits in the bath of motor oil, has a single wire that goes over to the kill switch.
Oil sensor.
Huh?
Oil sensor.
Yeah, but what's it do? Obviously it's sensing oil, but what does it do?
Was it in the racing engines?
Some of them have it. You had an answer to it?
He said anything I was going to say oil sensor, but if that's right.
Yeah, that's the name of the part, but what does it do?
Turned off the motor. Oh, isn't it like, say you like lift the car or something like that, it turns off the motor?
How does it turn it off? Or why would it turn it off?
Because it's not sensing any oil.
Very good. That's exactly what it is. It's a sensor that tells if there's motor oil in the block. If there's no motor oil in the block, that can be very bad, right? Just like how well would you function without blood? Not very well. And blood and motor oil are the same thing. So for an engine, motor oil is blood.
Do you have to get a blood change every 3,000 miles?
Yes.
Oops.
Well, it happens naturally, though. So, okay, so I'm going to install this. Now, this, if you'll notice, has a weird shape to it, and so that it sits like this. So this domed edge is towards us. Okay, and we throw the wires through the hole, bell them towards me, and then the sensors will sit there. Now we're going to use these two medium ones. Okay. All right. So it's a 6mm bolt, but I'm going to use an 8mm socket for the head because the bolt doesn't determine the size of the wrench. Okay? That didn't sound right. The diameter of the bolt does not dictate the size of the head, because you can have different sizes. Okay, just a light torque on that. So those both have been installed. I have one more I need to put on there. That is the flanged nut. Kind of like that one, but that's not it. That's the start of it. This is a flanged nut. Kind of an obvious, but this part is the flange. That's the nut. I'm going to put it right there so that holds that in place. So if you have a racing motor, you'll need one of these to help seal that hole. So once again, you don't want motor oil coming out. And we don't want a racing motor dying because of lack of oil either. Okay, so I haven't done too much, have I? I've gotten the governor installed, got the oil sensor installed. Now I'm ready to install the crankshaft. So here's our crankshaft. So we have the two main sides. This is the PTO. How do I know it's the PTO? It's the squared end. Okay, this is the flywheel side or the magneto side. These are the bearing supports right here. Because the flywheel doesn't sit here, and it doesn't. The lawnmower blade, the clutch, or whatever doesn't sit here. The flywheel sits way over here on this taper, and then whatever mechanism would sit here. Power takeoff PTO. This is the crank journal, or known as the connecting rod journal. That's where the connecting rod will be attached. Now when I go to assemble this, I don't want no lubrication. I need some assembly lubrication here, or it can rub, okay? And getting hot, and it will seize. Okay, so I'm going to put some grease on there. Now, which end goes in first? Anybody know? This one?
Yeah,
No, the other side.
This one?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to put some here on my finger and coat the bearing support. That's this part right here. I'm going to put some here on this gear. This is the camshaft gear. It's easier while it's still out of the motor. Some on the connecting rod, and then the last. And then this gear will mesh with the governor gear right there. Okay, now I can't just drop it straight in because there is a gap. I need to tip the motor. So let me get that all into view. And we'll just slide it in. And there it is. Now I'll turn this and I'll make sure that the governor is spinning. That way I know I have it completely meshed. Okay. So now I'm ready to install the piston. This is the hardest of all of the job on reassembly. Okay. So I'm just going to hold that there for a minute. I got to go get some more tools. Please be patient. Do not get on your phones. Sorry. There is no need. We'll have plenty of time later.
I got the E30. I got the fucking Let me see that.
It's dirty.
I don't know, I don't have one.
You've seen that pair that you
Okay.
It's the smallest one.
Snot has right there.
You can just send me yours.
Yeah, I've seen it's on his album.
I might do it right here for that thing.
I have a Brindley has my Toyota Supra.
Oh, that one. That's Piston.
That's gonna include
Alright, so let's go over the tools I have here. I'm just going to set that to the side. That is a nut driver, 1/4 inch. Some of you guys have them in your toolbox. What's nice about this particular style is it has a receiver right there. So I can put that on there and be able to use more torque. Okay. Next thing is a hammer. This is known as a ball peen hammer. As we learned when we sat and learned about the tools, so that is the ball part there. On this hammer, what we're actually going to use is the handle itself. Okay, not the metal part. We don't want to smack the piston with the metal. It will break the piston. And then we have a ring compressor. Okay, that compresses the rings on the piston to install it. Okay. On the piston, we want to make sure that our rings, the gaps, are not lined up. So right here, here's one of the gaps. And then now I'm looking for the lower rings gap. There it is. Okay, I'm going to make sure that they are opposite sides of the piston. I'm going to now double check that my oil ring gap, there it is, and the other one are opposite. There it is. Okay. Why do I want all the gaps opposite of one another?
So the oil doesn't just all flow in at the same spot.
Yeah, because it will just pass. The same thing with compression, it will just pass. Okay. Now I just got to find which one of these. Now, when you start assembling your motor, you need to be careful, and some of you will notice this, is if you look at the connecting rod, it has these two little steps right there and right there. And if you grab the wrong oil dipper or install it backwards, it will snap that thin little piece of metal. And some of them have already snapped. So, like that one fit. And that one fits. So, okay. So we have our piston. All the rings have been set. The wrist pin's good. I'm going to double check my wrist pin keepers. There's these two little metal steel springs right in there. I want to make sure that they are there. That one's there. And that one is in there. Some students have taken the wrist pins out, so I want to make sure that's there. Okay, I'm going to make sure that my oil dipper looks good, that there's no gouging, there's no fractures. Okay, because if this breaks, you owe a whole set. That's 25 bucks. That's 1/4 of the engine is right here. Okay, when you signed the disclosure, you noted that if you broke any of the equipment, you would replace it. So be aware of that. So delicate. All right, so I need to put some of the assembly grease in the block on the piston and on the ring compressor. Okay, so we'll start with the block. So same thing, I'm going to just put it on my finger. And then I'm just going to coat the bore. Here's the other finger. There we go. This way, this will break down in motor oil. But this way you don't have metal-to-metal contact when you start the motor up for the first time. That's done. So what else do I need grease on? Piston, okay. So I want to put it on the skirts of the piston and the journal of the connecting rod. And what will happen is as you put this assembly grease on, it will get to a point where it starts becoming sticky. That means you don't have enough on. Okay, now I'm going to put it on here and there. And you don't want too much because then the clearances are taken up by all the grease. Okay, now I'm ready for the hardest part of the whole assembly. This is where most people fail. This is where most parts get broken. That's installing this into that. Okay? So you will look that you will have an arrow on the top of your piston. That arrow needs to point down. Okay? So if it doesn't point down and then this doesn't come downwards, that means someone has taken the wrist pin apart and flipped it. You'll need to adjust that. Okay? So I'm going to just set that in there. I'm going to make sure that the counterweights of my flywheel are towards the piston bore, so that way the connecting rod's journal right there is opposite. Okay, double check, arrows down, still moving. I'm going to now grab my ring compressor. I'm going to make sure that the 1/4 inch square is up. I'm going to grab my nut driver and open that up. I'm going to hold the piston outwards. So I'm just putting my hand in there. I'm holding the back end of the connecting rod. This is where your teammate helps. I'm going to set that on there. Now your teammate will hold that there, and you're going to tighten this down. Okay? Now I'm going to do this all here on my own. See how lucky I am today. Okay? Now I set that on there. I tighten it, but it's not squared. It's pushed down here, but you'll see there's a gap right there. That is where a lot of this failure happens, is they go too fast. You got to make sure that it's perfectly squared. Now it's compressing the rings down inside the piston, so into those grooves there, so that the rings will pass that space, so it will slide into the block. Because the goal is to be able to do this. Okay? Now with the rings there, that's trying to seal the compression. If you don't do it right, one of the rings will pop out. Okay, now this one doesn't have any rings, so it's easy to do that. But one of these rings will pop out, and if you keep forcing it, you will snap that ring, and you'll snap the piston, and then what? You're buying a new piston set. Okay? So, this is hence why we're going very slow. Very direct. You notice I'm not rushing anything. Everything's still nice and slippery. Arrow's still pointing down. The counterweights are still opposite. Whoops. Sorry, not opposite. Towards. So that way the connecting rod, which is sitting back here, has room to drop in. That this is pushed all the way in. That the piston's arrow is down, because if you have it sideways, that connecting rod will be sideways, and it can get jammed up inside here too. And it has to be all lined up. Because what do you think I'm going to do next? I want to take this into the hammer, and I want to push that piston in. If nothing's lined up right, it will not go all the way in. It will lock up, and you'll have to start over. Do not force it. Okay, just like that happened. So, very close. I don't know if you'll be able to see. Let's see here. Where is it? It failed. Right there. The ring is sticking out. Just, I can hear the pencil going over it. So, I need to start over. Okay? Just going to push the piston back out. Making sure the rings are still lined up. There's still plenty of grease on there. Open this up again. And reinstall. Arrows down. Counterweight's in the right spot. Let's see if I have any better luck today. There it goes. Okay. Now if I look inside the block, the connecting rod is down here, and the journal for it is up here. They're not lined up. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the piston back up, not all the way out, okay, just all the way to the close to the top dead center. Rotate the crankshaft and line them up. Okay, and now they are lined up. The connecting rod is sitting on top. And now as I push this down, it pushes the crankshaft around. Now I'm at bottom dead center. I'm going to now rotate the crankshaft. And there we are ready to install the oil dipper. I'm going to make sure that there is still lube on that journal as I've been moving things around. Okay. And now I can install the oil dipper. Now the oil dipper points down so it dips into the motor oil and flings it upwards. Okay, so I'm going to just tip the motor. And I'm going to install that. Now just like when I took that off, this is probably the longest bolts you'll ever feel like you have to put on. These are fine thread. There is 2 of them. And we're going to slide those in. What I'm doing, whoops. I'll give it a couple turns. That way when I pull on it, I know it doesn't come out. There we go. What I'm doing is I'm holding the bolt like this, and then I line it up at the hole and then use my other hand to push it in. Okay, same thing, I'm going to twist that. Okay, and then I'm going to sit there and tighten it. And tighten it. Now, what will happen is you're going to get it to a point where it's tight and you're going to have to torque it down. Now the torque specifications is written in the room on the whiteboard behind the blue door. So if you close the door, you'll see the torque specs. Caden, can you go look it up? 'Cause I don't remember what they are. Yeah, the rest should be in inches. Now, when do you guys get to reassemble your motor?
Slides.
Once your slides have been approved. Not just turned in, but approved. Okay? And if they've not been approved, what will you be doing right now?
Working on the slides.
Working on your slides. Okay. Yeah. So I have it set for 80 because you guys are going to take this motor apart again. Well, not you, but the next class. So I don't have it overdone. But this one I'm going to finish building completely. So. Torque wrench, you will receive it from me. Do not hand it to somebody else. That's not the right one. Grab it from the cooler. Torque wrenches are very delicate.
Put the tape measure down.
Why haven't you really?
It's just cracked.
Shit happens to me every
Just because my mom just because my stories on this.
Is it the active medicine? Shit sucks. I
Sucks, but
take
so
it
does
like
that.
5th grade.
Yo, my rib got curb rash.
Okay, so this is a clicking torque wrench. The reason why I want you to hand it back to me is because if you do not untorque this torque wrench, it ruins it. Okay, if I leave this torqued, there's metal rods inside here that will then permanently take that bend and will no longer have an accurate reading. And when you're building engines, you want an accurate torque wrench so you don't break things. And you're going to work up to the torque. So 80 is on there. This one's, I'm going to go to 120, but I'm going to start out at 60. So on here, I don't know if it's even going to pick it up on the camera. So you see the numbers right there? It has 65. And the other one's 50. So if I want 60, what would I get? 50 plus 10 makes 60, right? So right there is 60, or sorry, that's 50 because it's right on the dot and that's 0. So if I move it to 5, what's my math? 55. And now I'm at 10, 60, okay? So I'm now going to rotate this a little more to get a little more gap. That was it. That was the click. Okay. Now I'm going to go up.
So it's kind of like a micrometer.
No, the micrometer measures size. This measures tightness. So I'm at 80. Okay. I'm at 100 now. 110, 115, 120. Hey guys. Done. Done. Okay, so the major rotating mass is in here. You should be able to rotate it with a lot of effort. So there we go. So we're still good. The last thing I want to put, there's a couple more pieces I want in for this motor to be ready. And that is, I want the tappets in here. Okay, now what's important about those tappets? Remember what the tappets do? Yep. Okay, so how do I know a tappet versus a valve?
The tappets are flat and smaller.
Yep.
Short.
So the tappet makes a T. A valve, okay, makes a V, so that the air-fuel mixture can go through. Now, when it comes to your tappets, there is no difference between exhaust or intake. Okay, same thing. I'm going to put some lube on there because there's no bearing supports in that spot. Okay, on both of them, as well as the face. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and install the tappets. Okay, and now we need to install the camshaft. And I'm only cleaning this off so you can see this mark. Very faintly, you'll see a little dot right there. That is your timing mark. Okay, that mark should be over here when the piston is all the way, all the way up. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. Piston's all the way up. There's a little bit of play as the crankshaft flips over. Now let's take a look at where that mark is. And there it is. Okay? And that's important because this is on the tooth of the gear. Sorry. That is on the tooth of the gear. Whereas if we look on the camshaft, it's between, it's in the valley. Okay? So when I install it, those two need to line up. So I'm going to lube the bearing supports, the cam lobes, and the other bearing support. Do not get grease into this section here. This is your brake. This helps make it easier to start your motor so you don't get a compression build. Okay, a little dab on each of the bearings. I'm just going to run it over. And then just what's left on the gears. Okay, now these are Healy cut gears, meaning they're cut in a slant. So when you install it, it's going to turn a little. So I'm going to line it up with the bearing support right back there. That's where this bearing goes. And line up the gears. And now you can see the timing has been set. At this point, do not rotate the motor because you'll need this set when you do the valve lash. You need the piston at top dead center. This is at top dead center. Both gears are perfectly lined up. Okay. If we move it and I go and do my valve lash at that space, it will not work properly. Okay. So at this point, you're going to make sure that those are lined up perfectly, because once I put on the back cover, can I tell? No. Because even that little bit, so I look at the piston, that little bit, I can't tell. Okay? You cannot put the back cover on until I have signed your block. Okay? I will come around and inspect that and everything else before you can close up the case, because I want to know before you close it. It's hilarious because a lot of people will have a motor and you'll hear the ta-da-ta-da-ta-da-ta-da, and it's the connecting rod that's not tightened. And everybody goes, oh, it's tight, and it's because I didn't check it. And they're like, oh, well, you're running behind or yada yada. You cannot close the case until I have signed the block.
Or you'll have a push rod and you just pick up in your engine.
Yeah, and we've had those too. So, okay. So if you are done, that is as far as you're going today. There you are. So, to the classroom or to the lab? Okay, which one do you want? Are you ready?
Yeah, can I put it?
Yeah, do you have other shirts than the white?
I have a hoodie in my locker.
Okay, I would grab that too. Yes?
I have to be in the library
Okay. Should have a note next time, okay? Thank you.
Can I start putting down now?
Huh?
Can I start putting down?
Sure, just bring back a note with you, please. Oh, shit. I didn't know it took that long. I guess not. Everybody head to the classroom. That's all right. Kind of works better. Yeah, that's a 46-minute recording.